Assalamualaikum. My name is Mama. I want to see my daughter over there. Oh, here. Oh, here. And he's my son, Sahar. And what grade are they? 12 years. Come on.
I'm an engineer and a parent of the chapter.
But you got interested in kids' education support. Yeah. Or up?
Oh, my name's Iman.
What year? जोर से बोलो आपकी आवाज है.
She's Arabic. She's Arabic.
Speak loudly.
My name is Saddiqui. From Australia.
Are you in college?
No.
No, I understand you're from Nigeria, but what are you studying here?
She's a physician.
You're a medical student?
She was in Algeria, right? She was a medical student.
So are you a physician? Okay.
So you
Okay.
this is for application, but anyway, yes, fine. Okay. After. Okay, good. UNT.
Yes.
All right.
So I'm studying biology.
Major. So you all going to go to medical school, right?
Right. So my name is Alia. I'm a sophomore at UT Dallas, and I'm majoring in healthcare studies.
UT Dallas. UTD.
Yeah.
That's confusing. जोर से बोलो तुम लोग कुछ
So,
quiet हो.
When you're speaking, please you can lower your mask
हाँ, बोलो
so
तो
that everybody can speak. This is a big room, so
loudly. Man, we want you to be leaders, guys. Don't be so submissive voices.
practice being heard.
Bolo. You what?
The senior.
In high school. Okay.
You can stand up also so that people may know who's speaking.
Marshall. Good job.
I'm a sophomore at UT and I'm studying medicine. Okay, ma'am.
They're in college, but they're not here. Where? Yes. The UTD student, are you part of the AMWPA chapter there or not?
Yes.
That's it.
Okay. No, mashallah.
Very good, very good. Yeah, that in itself, yeah. Yeah. So then they already know it. Can you find out where they go? Yeah, let me know. Huh? Uh-huh. Lower the mask, please. Very interesting to see so many parents. I guess it should not be a surprise. There is a very different set of parents, Asian parents are famous for that. But very nice, mashallah, you guys are providing the support. I hope there is no pressure. So, Assalamu alaikum. I welcome everybody here. I'm the IUCC board member here, Dr. Saima Muhammad, and we have arranged this in collaboration with AMWPA, which stands for American Muslim Women Physician Association. So we are holding this the first time ever here, presentation for the medical school application process. And I'm very, very thankful to Dr. Rihanna and Dr. Zareen for arranging this lecture here. And we are going to have 4 presenters here. They are the medical students. And we have Sahar Elchehabi, medical student, second year TCOM, and Shawana Shaikh, medical student, second year TCOM as well. And a couple of other, Siddiqui and Ridah Siddiqui, are also coming here, inshallah. So we'll be starting shortly. I really appreciate you all coming here and getting some benefit. That's a very good presentation. They are going to tell you a lot of information about the medical school application process, starting from the college, how you have to spend your 4 years, how it affects your application, how what you should do in your application, financial aspects, medical school in Texas, and how to apply out of Texas. So a lot of different all those are going to present from different aspects. So thank you for coming.
It's because they went to
I
don't want to put her down. I know, because I knew she was but it also it's understandable. It is understandable because it was on the No,
starting initially, or you are in the end?
we're all mixed. We have to introduce ourselves at the beginning, so but they're 5 minutes away.
They should run late.
It's gonna be all of us because we're introducing ourselves. Yeah. I can. They should be coming in. One should be coming right now. I got you. Do you think we should start over with the slides? Do you think?
What is he talking about?
I can talk about this. This is me, and then this is Ridah. This will take time. I can just get started on my slide.
Go over it briefly.
Yeah, my slide will take a little bit of time. We can get back to introductions later when the two come up.
They're more interesting question.
That's true. That's true. In the meantime,
It's going to catch it.
I guess that.
Muslim can come to power. Power is in education. How much you want to say big slogan of a job is not important. You have to do the grassroots work of getting yourself educated.
Can Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We'll introduce all of us in a second once everybody gets here. But this is, as you know, this is a workshop about medical school applications. Specifically, we're going to focus on the TMD SAS application system, which is in Texas. So let's go ahead and get started. Once everyone gets here, we'll go back to meet your speakers, which we are 4 medical students. We'll come back to this in a second. But firstly, we're going to speak a little bit on what is AMWPA. So it's a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2008. It's just to build a really strong foundation for our Muslim future health professionals, especially women, empowering us and providing lots of volunteering opportunities or educational workshops such as this one. And we do lots of things such as host these workshops, host health fairs, just like the one yesterday in Flower Mound in Louisville, and much, much more. So thank you for coming out. We'll get started.
All right, assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Shawana. I'm a second year at TCOM. All right, so as Sahar mentioned today, mostly we'll be talking about the TMD SAS because most of us are Texas residents here. But I just wanted to highlight the other application systems as well in case anyone was interested in applying outside of Texas. So we have ACOMAS, which is for DO programs outside of Texas. Just stand up. Okay, no problem. No problem, no problem. I don't think yeah, no problem. Okay. So we have ACOMAS, which is for DO programs outside of Texas. We have AMCAS, which is for MD programs outside of Texas. And these are all the 3 application systems we have in the US. So I'm just going to go through and just talk about some of the differences between each application system, but we will dive into more details regarding TMD SAS along the presentation. So first of all, for TMD SAS, you can apply with an MCAT score as old as 5 years. That's different than ACOMAS and AMCAS, in which you can only apply with an MCAT score as old as 3 years. So what does that mean? That means if you took your MCAT 5 years ago, you can still apply. If you took it 6 years ago, you need to retake the MCAT and then reapply. So then that's the same thing for ACOMAS or AMCAS. If you took your MCAT 3 years ago, you can apply. If you took it 4 years ago, you need to retake the MCAT before you can apply to these application programs. Next, for ACOMAS and AMCAS, when you're submitting your primary application, you have to submit your transcript as well. And you do that through your school. You're gonna request through your school, and they're gonna send it to these different application services. And it's necessary to submit your transcript along with your primary application because that is what allows for verification of that application. And then once it's verified, they go ahead and send it to all the different schools that you've put on your list. But for TMD SAS, they request your transcript later. It'll be sometime in the springtime once you've gone through the interview process, and I believe like after match day as well. I don't remember, but it's later on. TMD SAS will send you an email, and that's when you will go ahead and send your transcripts. For TMD SAS, you can have at the very least 3 letters of recommendation, but at most 4 letters of recommendation. So that can be either 1 letter from your health professions advising committee, which we will talk about later, or it can be 3 to 4 individual letters from your professors, employers, mentors, etc. For ACOMAS, you can have anywhere between 2 to 6 letters. For AMCAS, you can have anywhere between 3 to 10 letters. And then finally for TMD SAS, so each application system, they want you to talk about your work and activities, everything you've done in your undergrad years, leading up, everything you've done in your pre-health journey. So in AMCAS, they don't break it up into different categories, and it's just you can include 15 maximum different work and activities. No more than 15, but you could of course less than 15 as well. But they don't break it up into different categories the way TMD SAS and ACOMAS do. When I say categories, for example, in TMD SAS, they'll have a different section for healthcare experiences. They'll have a different section for community service. They'll have a different section for leadership and achievements. And then for ACOMAS, it's a similar thing. They'll break it up into non-healthcare experience, healthcare experience, community service. Additionally, TMDSAS and AMCAS, they have the most meaningful section. So in that, you choose 3 activities, 3 of your most meaningful activities, and you'll write a short essay, short answer type for each of those activities, and you're gonna just talk a little bit more about your experience and then reflect how it connected to your pre-medical journey. But ACOMAS does not have that. You don't have the most meaningful experiences that you would have to discuss. Additionally, for TMDSAS and ACOMAS, besides the personal statement, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but for each of the application systems, you do have to submit a personal statement. The only difference is the word count. TMDSAS is 5,000 characters, I believe, and then the other 2 are 5,300. But besides the personal statement, TMDSAS and ACOMAS, you do have to submit additional essays. So for TMDSAS, you have the personal characteristics essay and the optional essay, and we'll talk more about that later on. For ACOMAS, you have the COVID impacts essay, and that's where you're going to talk about how COVID-19 impacted your pre-health journey. And then AMCAS, you don't have to write an additional essay unless you're applying to an MD, PhD program, then you write an additional essay for that. For TMDSAS, is just 1 flat fee for the primary. That's, I believe, $215. It doesn't matter if you apply to 1 school in Texas, if you apply to all 13, it's going to be $215 for the primary application. For ACOMAS and for AMCAS, you pay for the first school, and then it's an additional charge for each school you add. So for example, for AMCAS, it's $175 for the first school that you add, and then $45 extra for each school after. So that can be something that changes your decision about what application system you want to apply to. And then finally, for TMDSAS, we have match day in March, and that's when you go ahead and you open your application system in TMDSAS, and then you find out where you get into. But for ACOMAS and AMCAS, there's no match day. You find out on a rolling basis, and it depends whether you applied early admission or regular admission. Early admission, you'll find out in the fall, winter time, but for regular admission, you'll find out in the springtime. And then, like I said, it's just rolling admission as soon as you finish your interview, and then you find out. Okay, we're gonna go back and introduce ourselves again now that all our speakers are here. Okay, do you want to go? You guys want to go? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hi, I'm Siddiqui. I graduated from SMU for undergrad just this past May, and I'm an MS1 at UTSW.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Ridah. I'm from Austin. I just graduated from the University of Texas Austin in neuroscience and nutritional science.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Sahar. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I went to undergraduate school at University of Texas at Austin, and I'm currently a 2nd-year medical student at TCOM.
Assalamualaikum everyone. So I'm originally from Michigan. So I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad. I graduated in December 2020, and then I'm 2nd year at TCOM.
Okay. Now, application time.
What is the DO and what's the MD? What's the difference?
Yeah, I can talk about it. So DO and MD, it's the same. You get the same medical education. The only difference is that with DO, you additionally learn about osteopathic manipulative medicine. And what that is basically, I know it's a bigger, basically what that is you learn how you can use, it's kind of like, I like to call it muscle manipulative techniques. And it's how you can kind of use a body to heal itself. So we just learn the innate properties of our muscles, bones, joints, and all of that, and how we can use that to heal besides just pharmaceuticals.
Is MD plus additional
Yes,
That's how it's looked at.
that's how
So,
it's looked at, yeah.
with the DO program, you're going to graduate and be a physician. The only difference between MD and DO is that you have to have this added curriculum of OMM, which is what she just mentioned, that you have to take and study so that you can get your physician license. They both end up practicing in hospitals. They practice outpatient, inpatient, any specialties that you are interested in. They're just two different names for a doctor.
And the residency programs are the same too, for MD and DO, yeah.
Length of the course is same.
The length of the course is the same, and some people don't even practice OMM after they graduate medical school, it just depends on your
Well, they
specialty.
can do all, they can go to surgery. they
Yes.
can-
Yeah, any specialty, any specialty.
Yeah, they're both physicians. They're both this.
Like
They're
you'll
both
see in
doctors.
so many surgery residencies, DOs and MDs are doing it together and
Yeah.
they're working side by side.
Yeah.
Like it's the same.
So it's just relatively newer compared to allopathic medicine. So it's allopathic versus osteopathic medicine. Osteopathic is relatively newer, which is why it's less commonly known.
So the same school offers both, or they-
There's
different
different
schools.
schools, we do have a list that we'll show later
Yes.
on.
But first, we're going to talk about the application timeline.
So how many of the students who are present here, how many of y'all are in undergrad, just to get an idea? Okay, out of the ones in undergrad, how many are you interested in applying this upcoming cycle? One, raise up fire. Awesome. Okay, so that's round 5. So the way that application timeline works is you have to first consider, are you trying to take a gap year?
Do you want some of my water? It's really good tasting
The way
water.
that we try to consider whenever you're applying, everyone has their own personal application timeline.
Monkey
That's
squeeze.
dependent on your courses, like what you're taking.
Monkey squeeze.
undergraduate institution,
Monkey squeeze.
As well as what timeline you're trying to apply and get into.
Fine. Here's your squeeze for the day. Monkey squeeze.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't go. This was above and beyond your needs right now.
And
It says,
such that when you graduate, you immediately matriculate.
it says timeline for,
I
this
did
is for undergrad. Sophomore biochemistry.
I took a
You
gap
took
year,
a gap
yeah.
year, awesome. So everyone has their own timeline with how they go through things, but I'm just gonna be going through, if you are trying to apply in your junior year and you're trying to get into medical school.
Undergrad.
So what you do is, in a previous
Yeah.
presentation,
College and college.
Yeah.
we had in.
Should we get more N95 masks?
We should.
I'm gonna skim through just.
N94.
Typically.
I mean, the
whenever
ones that you
are
were
planning
the most
for
at school and we liked a lot. What are they called?
N94.
Yeah.
Whenever you take biochemistry, you're planning to take your MCAT immediately after that. And so depending on when you are planning to take biochemistry, it's very common to see people take it either their sophomore year in the spring semester or the junior in the fall semester, as well as junior later down the line. But if you are planning to graduate and immediately matriculate, you should be planning to take biochemistry either in the sophomore spring or in the junior fall. And then of course,
Yeah.
immediately
Quality.
that summer, following your junior year.
I'm not getting the white ones. The white ones are too big for all of us.
No, please
your
don't.
junior year, in the fall, and then that winter break. you can
And
study-
please don't get any funky colors because we all know
The
that.
benefit, the thing that I personally would recommend.
Gray,
a lot of us
gray,
recommend
white,
is the earlier you
black,
take
or
the
beige
MCAT,
is
the
okay
better,
too.
because you have more opportunities to retake the MCAT. It's really common for people to take the MCAT not once, but twice or even 3 times. And there is no detriment in retaking the MCAT over and over again. It's about getting the score that you feel you want to be competitive for a medical school of your interest. So after taking the MCAT, either the summer after your junior year, the summer after your sophomore year, the spring, the winter after during your junior year, your junior spring year. So in the spring leading up, so that would be March to May. That spring leading up to the application cycle opening up, you should be thinking about your application path. So you should be thinking about things how to write your personal statement, things regarding consolidating your extracurriculars and consolidating your leadership, volunteering, shadowing, healthcare opportunities. You should be kind of thinking about making sure you have everything kind of checked off on your list. And so that should be included in your application path. As well as really thinking about, do you actually want to be a doctor? Why do you want to do this beyond just my parents said so? So on May 1st, the TMD SAS application will open up, and that will allow you to see exactly what essays there are, This includes your primary, specifically your primary essays, as well as starting to fill in the application for extracurriculars. And the TMDSS application is very similar to kind of Applied Texas or the Common App that you did for getting into college, and that you don't just have essays, you also have extracurriculars, and you have to be talking about framing these things in a way, and everything has to be cohesive. An application is about making yourself stand out and making yourself look like a cohesive applicant beyond just, I have a 4.0, I have a 520. So then the application submission itself, so the button to be able to say, I'm ready to submit my application, everything is done, opens May 15th. So you have from the 1st to the 15th to just fill out your application. You don't have to submit May 15th, it just opens that day. And what we find typically is the sooner you submit your primary application, the better. Now, there is a reasoning behind this. It's because you have more, your secondaries come in after the colleges receive your primary application. So secondary applications are when, so essentially TMDSAS is a Texan system. So it's state intrastate, it's a intrastate system that includes multiple colleges that we'll flip to later, right?
Yeah.
And so this primary application gets sent out to all of the colleges. Once they receive your primary application, that university will send you specifically a secondary application to fill out. And that includes school-specific questions and going into a little more depth in detail. And you want to tailor those responses to that school. Each school has their own quirk regarding what kind of applicants and what kind of culture they have at their school regarding their religious. And so once you submit your secondary application, that is when you get calls for interviews if they like. And so the thing with interviews is those come in on a rolling basis. So if you're ahead of the game, you submit your primaries first, you submit your secondaries ahead of time, the schools have your full application to consider you for an interview in advance. And that gives you more time so interviews will be conducted from mid-June, as early as mid-June to early January, early to like mid-January. So you would want to consider that the school's getting your application as soon as possible, so they're able to give you an interview slot for an earlier point, June, July, and August, as compared to coming later down the line, you submitted in November. That's typically not a great position to be in when you're applying to medical school, because then if you're applying in November, there are there are thousands of other candidates that have applied before you, and the competition becomes greater as the application season goes down. So always, always, always think about applying early. Apply fast, apply early. And in order to apply early, you have to be prepping and thinking about these things in advance. Don't do the procrastination thing the night before. It does not work for this. So after interviews are conducted, they end around early. So again, it's all about kind of rolling and being ahead of the game with a group of candidates. So there is a system in Texas called the pre-match system. And so what this entails is that certain schools will extend a offer to you in advance, indicating that they want you. You have essentially gone into medical school. It is not a formal, it isn't a, you have gone in yet. There is still a next step, but it's basically indicating you have gone in. So this is called a pre-match. And so pre-match offers are extended between early October to all the way leading up to match day, which is March 3rd. What happens then is on match day, you have to rank the schools that you interviewed at. So if you interviewed at one school, you only have the one. But if you interviewed at up to however many schools, if you interviewed at 6 different schools, you have to list a ranking based off of what school do you want to go to. And so again, in order to be, you want to get that pre-match as soon as possible, right? Because that is your card. I got into medical school. In order to get to that point that you got the pre-match offer, you want to be submitting early so that schools pre-match you early. Now, of course, you can still get in, even if you don't get a pre-match, you can still get into a medical school. And that is based off of match day. So say you interviewed at 3 different schools, you didn't hear anything back from them, you didn't pre-match. Come match day, you have the opportunity to rank 3 different schools. Say you interviewed at Southwestern, you interviewed at A&M, and you interviewed at Dallas. if you want to be going to Southwestern #1, you'd want to rank that #1. Say you don't really vibe with A&M, you want to rank that 3rd, and you put Dell in the middle. Okay. When come match day, schools will have ranked you saying that we want these students. In addition to what they've already pre-matched, they also have a list of students that we want these students. So come match day, if you have ranked a school, say you wanted Southwestern, and Southwestern said, we don't want her in, we didn't match her, but we will waitlist her. You won't match at Southwestern, but say Dell wanted you, and let's say A&M also wanted you. You ranked Dell 2nd, you ranked A&M 3rd. So that means you will get a match offer from Dell. And so the system behind this is kind of a very convoluted system. It's really complicated. I'm sure everyone has questions about this. The point of the match system is to ensure that techs and applicants only have one offer of admission by the end of match day. So that is the purpose of, if you have already pre-matched, you can, let's say you pre-matched at A&M. And you haven't heard back from Southwestern, you want to match that. So you want to be going to Southwestern. You kind of have a guarantee that you can match Southwestern as 1, you can match A&M as 2. And you know that, inshallah, if Southwestern if they said no, you still have the A&M. So this is, again, it's pretty convoluted system. All we want to take away from the timeline is, again, apply fast, apply early. That is your best bet to be competitive.
Yeah, let's do a question. Also, if this seems like a lot at once, it's because we're trying to give you an overview of everything right now so that you're aware of it ahead of time. You're gonna keep looking at this over and over and over. If it seems overwhelming right now, completely normal. It's kind of like the first time I ever learned about the MCAT, I was like, what is this test? I was like, how long is it? A 7-hour-long test? Of course I was overwhelmed, right? But like, alhamdulillah, you keep looking over it, you keep like accepting the fact that, you know, you have to go through this, and your passion is what's going to push you through. So it's okay to feel like this is a lot of information. It's really supposed to be an introduction to all of this, so you're aware of it and you can prepare yourself ahead of time. So let's go ahead and move on to medical schools.
So these are a list of the MD and DO medical programs offered through Texas in the TMD-SAS. So there's another, I'm sure we talked about it earlier, the AMC. So there is a national system. So the way that there's Applied Texas and the Common App, med school is the same way. TMD-SAS is essentially Applied Texas, and the AAMC is the Common App. So AMCAS. Sorry, not AMCAS, is AMCAS. So it's the American Association of
It's through AMC.
Yes,
It's through.
So
It's a lot of letters.
It's a national system. So we're not going through AMC because that's a whole other, that's the rest of the 49 states. We're just focusing on the one right now. So, but these are all just in Texas. These are all of the medical schools offered. So this includes MD and DO programs. And as Sahar and Shawana mentioned earlier, MD and DO are both different types of medical degrees. Just as if you're interested in pharmacy, there is a PhD in pharmacy. There's another specific like pharmacy degree. Like there are a lot of different ways to get to a certain career path. Medicine is the same way. There are different types of degrees and they have different theories of medicine. So MDs are allopathic and then DOs are osteopathic.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention, I know someone asked about this earlier. In Texas, we have 2 DO schools. So that's one of them is UNT HSC, where both Sahar and I go, and the other one is Sam Houston, which is the 4th one right there. So those are the 2 DO programs, and you do apply to them through TMD-SAS. You don't have to do
That one's not TMD.
There is also Incarnate Wood, but that you apply to that through ACOMAS, which is the other DO application system.
And there's an MD medical school, TCU, that isn't a part of TMD-SAS either. It's a part of AMCAS, which is the national. So the ones listed in these 2 slides are only TMD-SAS, which is.
Yeah. And the purpose of this is that it's literally a checkbox.
Yeah.
You just check off every single school that you want to apply.
Yeah.
And that's all that's included in this. So then, as Sahar and Shawana mentioned, there are other schools as well in Texas, but they're not incorporated into this TMD-SAS system. And again, this just makes it very comprehensive. You can send out all your primaries at once. instead of having to find each individual.
Okay. And then
Okay, and then there are specific, so I mentioned pre-match, the pre-match system. Certain schools in Texas actually offer an early decision program. So kind of like early admission, early action that we found with college applications. This is a similar system in that these schools in particular you have to submit your application by, I believe, August 15th to be considered for their early decision. And then you just hear back as well.
Okay, so getting into the nitty gritty of the application itself, y'all know you always have to put like your name and your family information and all of that. I just thought these were some important points that you should know ahead of time that they're going to ask you about your personal information. First of them being, you're going to need a professional headshot of yourself. They ask you to upload a picture of yourself. So take that ahead of time. Make sure it's like a neutral background, nothing too crazy going on. Look presentable, dress in business attire, just look professional. So get that headshot ahead of time. You're gonna need to upload it onto your application system. Another thing are your finances. You're gonna need to report your finances, such as how you paid for college or how you paid for your living expenses. Let's say if you lived away from home, that information is really important as well. Stuff that you like uploaded onto your FAFSA, for example, if you applied for FAFSA, it's similar to that. So keep that handy. The last thing, because I know you go through undergraduate and then you apply for med school, they're going to ask you for high school information. They're going to ask you for your class rank and your class size. They're going to ask you for your SAT score and your ACT score if you take both. So if you forgot those, go find them and remember them, because they're going to have you put those in. I don't really know how big of a deal it is on your application. They ask them though. So make sure you have those handy whenever you start.
I think it can only help you, it can't harm.
Yeah. Okay, now going over the essays, which is a really big part of your application. For TMDSAS specifically, like Shawana mentioned earlier, you're gonna have 3 essays. It's gonna be your personal statement, which is the big one. That's like every med school requires a personal statement, which is basically a story of your life. We'll get into the details. Yeah. And then you're also gonna have 2 other essays that are shorter in length, your personal characteristics and your optional essay. A really, really big tip, you want to start early with your essays. Do not start your essays in May when the application system opens. You're going to feel like that's not enough time. You really want to get advice from people on your essays after you have them written. You're going to send them out to people you trust who are good writers, any of your mentors, any of your professors that you're really close with, anybody who can give you criticism and feedback so you can do better on these essays, because they want a really well-written essay. So just keep that in mind. Firstly, we're going to talk about the personal statement. So the prompt is, explain your motivation to seek a career in medicine. That's why I was saying you're basically writing the story of your life. It's super vague. Why do you want to go to medical school? Why do you want to be a doctor? So in Texas for TMDSAS, it's going to be 5,000 characters in length, including spaces. And outside of TMDSAS, for the other 2 systems, it's 5,300 characters, including spaces. So whatever I did, I remember when I was like refining my essay, because it's supposed to be only 5,000 characters. I did have something that I had to take out to keep it under 5,000, but then I had like another version of it that was under 5,300 in case I was going to apply out of TMDSAS. Keep that in mind. So here's some tips that I thought were really important. For a good start, for how to write your personal statement, think about your biggest experiences that you've gone through in your life, and like what qualities you've gotten out of them, how they've made you a better person, how they're going to make you a better medical student and future physician, inshallah. So your top 3, and you're going to make sure they're kind of coherent, kind of fluent with each other. They're smooth. It's not just 3 random things, unless they are 3 random things, but you can connect them together. Keep that in mind. You're just gonna write about these experiences and whatever you got out of them, reflect on them, and reflect on the gained qualities that you got out of them. Again, how are they going to make you a great medical student and future physician? And have a common theme that aligns with your full application. So again, if you're like in high school right now, this is not something you need to worry about. This is just something you want to think about along the way during undergraduate years. I remember I was like, what am I going to cater my volunteering experiences to? And what's my overall theme with all of the experiences that I'm trying to do, like in my clinical, clinical volunteering or non-clinical volunteering, whether I'm like working in a hospital or not working in a hospital, all of that stuff that we'll get into later. Just try to have a common theme. Next is the personal characteristics essay, which is the second essay you need for TMDSAS. It's only 2,500 characters in length, including spaces. That is our prompt that they give you. And so it says, please describe your personal characteristics, like your background, talents, skills, etc., or experiences that would add to the educational experience of others. This is basically your diversity essay. So you're going to talk about something unique about yourself, whether it's a skill that you have, whether it's about your religion, you know, Islam, whether it's about your family, whether it's about anything of that sort, culture. You're going to speak about an experience that you've had with that, reflect on it, kind of like you did with your personal statement. How does this reflect on you as a person? For example, it's made you more open and accepting to others. So you're going to be more open and unbiased to your peers in your medical school class, and further on as a doctor when you're practicing with your patients who are different than you, right? That's just an example. So keep this in mind. This is something you're going to have to write about as well. And the final essay is the optional essay. So they say optional, it's not optional. You have to write it. You're expected to write all 3 essays for the TMDSAS application. And it says, briefly discuss any unique circumstances or life experiences that are relevant to your application, which have not been previously presented. So this is also 2,500 characters, including spaces, and you can really do what you want with this. People use it as an opportunity to talk about any problems that they had in their application. Let's say you had to drop a class your sophomore year for some reason. It's an opportunity to like bring that up, say, I actually focused on getting better after this, and I did. As you can see in my transcript, I did better in the class next time, for example. Or if there's an experience that you didn't really get to talk about much in your application, or you didn't mention it in your other 2 essays, you're able to talk more about it in this essay as well and bring it up, and more reflection, more just showing off yourself to the admission committees at these medical schools, which is honestly the whole purpose of your essays. It's just you talking to them about who you are without having to be there in person. They're just getting a little glimpse at who you are and your writing and all of your experiences. And then they're going to see, okay, do I like this person? Do I send them an invite to interview? And then it goes from there. So that's basically what all of this is for.
What about like honesty, but drop a class, you have like
Yeah, because they're going to see that you dropped the class. And so if it was for a specific reason, right, then this is an opportunity for you to talk about it and say, okay, I actually had some different things going on in my life right now, or at the moment, but I bounced back, I did better, and here I am now, you know?
And it doesn't have to be about that.
Yeah.
It can literally be about any unique experience that you had that might be different.
Yeah.
Like just a hard time that you went through and how you navigated through that. But yeah, it could be a really good place for you to like justify something that
But I just want to add one more thing. I would advise that you use the optional essay to showcase a different side of yourself that you didn't display with the other 2 essays or with your working activities, because you want to, the AdCom, they don't know who you are. They haven't met you, but they're reading your application, and you want to show as many different versions of yourself as you can, and you do that through these essays.
even like different structure in failure and come out of the failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just one way you can use the optional essay.
Scope of the situation.
Mhm.
Works up.
There are a lot of different ways to utilize this essay. A lot of us as people have a variety of different experiences, right? And
Mhm.
what they want to see is who you are outside of just being a good student.
Yeah.
A lot of the application is about understanding what kind of unique, diverse individual are you to add to the diversity of their class. So it's more so about showcasing that you are a well-rounded individual. And if you've done something interesting, like say you started a business in LLC, that's a great place to put it in there. If you've done volunteering or something that you haven't previously mentioned, again, this is just more space to do that.
Okay, so basically, there's this thing called your chronology, your personal biography, and I'm gonna try to get really close to this because this is about to be a lot, okay? But something that someone told me that really helped me in my application process was every single word on your application should count, right? So not just a description that just tells you, oh, I did this for this many hours and yeah, that's what I did. Like you want every single word to count towards like AdComs knowing who you are as a person. Because everybody has volunteer experiences. Everybody has leadership experiences. Everybody has lab experiences. But it's like who you are as a person and what you took out of that, right? So kind of piggybacking off of what they said, your essays really are not just for you to restate your entire like resume, because they're going to get that inside this section. You want to expand on that and why those things made you a better person or a better candidate to be a doctor, and what things affected your character for you to be a good person, your integrity, your empathy, your critical thinking, your curiosity. So it's really about understanding you as a multifaceted individual, because they don't want just a bunch of robots inside their school. Okay, so the first section is going to be where, so basically, I didn't verbalize this. So basically the entire next section I'm about to talk about is different things that you did throughout your undergrad career and like how you file them. And it's basically a resume, if that makes sense. So I would like straight up copy paste things from my resume onto this to make that like clear. And so they section it off into different kinds of experiences, which we're going to go through one by one. For the lack of a better way for me to display to you how to do this, I just literally created screenshots from my application on my TMDS application with a couple of entries that I had and how I worded them. So each activity that you have, you only have, I say like what, 500 characters to talk about what you did, maybe even less than that. You have like you barely have like 3 sentences to include what you did, right? But like I said before, you're telling your story, right? So I didn't just write about what I did, what my responsibilities were, et cetera, et cetera. I told why that made me a better doctor, why that would make me a better doctor, or like I said what I learned from it, right? So for academic recognition, like you can talk about scholarships, awards, any type of academic recognition, right? So like I talked about one of the scholarships I had. I said this is a $40,000 merit scholarship award awarded to a limited number of incoming first-year students. So then I said what that was. Then I said what was the criteria being selected. So then I said what the criteria was. Then I said, well, then after another criteria, then it's like, well, what after that, right? What do you have to do after that when you get that? Then it's like, okay, they have to complete a culminating project upon graduation. So there's 3 parts to every single award. Like what it was, what the criteria was to get it, and what did you do with it, right? And so that's how you should do every single award. So that was for like a scholarship, and you can list all your scholarships if you have scholarships. If you don't, no big deal. And then for like higher society semifinalists, I was just like a more basic award, where then again, I said the criteria, I was nominated amongst them, what they did it, and you know what I mean? Just like include something small and make sure that it highlights that this is a significant award, not just like, oh yeah, everybody got it. You know what I mean?
Can everyone read this, by the way?
I know it's really small, but I'm sure that y'all can get, we'll get the slides after.
Yes, the slides will be available afterwards, and this is being recorded as well. So don't worry if you miss any piece of information.
Yeah, I know it's really small, but I don't know how else to do it. Like, I don't know how else to describe. So I literally just like screenshot my app. Okay, so you can also have non-academic recognition. I personally did not have any. I remember when I got to that part of the application, I was like, girl, I have none of these. But anyways, if you do something like choir or any type of art competition or any other, even like a Quran competition, if you won that, this is where you can put that, where it's like, I participated in this competition. I won 3rd place inside the Quran competition, or literally anything that's non-academic. I personally didn't have any. A lot of my friends didn't have any. We were like, dang, we were some nerds, bro. But like, anyways, include that. But make sure that that award can paint you in such a positive light in a way that you don't get to highlight in an academic thing, right? So let's say that you want to put on competition. Talk about how it took a lot of memorization, how it took a lot of like, it made you learn like a lot of like, you got to showcase your memorization skills. You got to showcase like your tajweed skills, things like that, or literally any other thing that you've done. Okay, leadership. This is so important. And I'm telling you, each of these sections could be its own workshop, but we're trying to get through as much as we can because it's an introduction. But leadership, so important, right? You can have both healthcare related leadership experiences and non-healthcare. So I included 2 entries, one being academic related, one being medical related and one being not medical related, right? So for example, Muslim Student Association activities share, that has nothing to do with events, right? But in my description, I said like I plan bi-weekly social and community service events to increase engagement of the Muslim student population at SMU in collaboration with local organizations. I learned creative ways to engage members as well as planning and organization skills to execute events smoothly. I didn't just say what I did. I could have stopped at the first sentence, right? But I said, what skills did I learn from that experience? Because it's meaningful that way, right? So now whenever they read it, it's not like, okay, she's just someone who like planned a bunch of events, right? It's like, oh, she learned organization skills through that, which contributes to her being a better physician, right? So then now this is a medical related leadership position. So this was for the Minority Association of Pre-Health students. I was a VP for it. So I said I delegate tasks to other board members for events and meetings. I had the MAP Big Little mentorship program and maintain our chapter membership with the SNMA, whatever. I am learning about other pre-health professions outside of medicine to cater to all members. So again, in the beginning, I said what I did, what my responsibilities were, because that is something you do have to talk about. But I made sure to end it with what I learned from it. What am I continuing to learn? What am I continuing to grow as, right? Because again, every single character needs to tell your story and what you learn, because these are things that like, that's how it's a little bit different from a resume, you know, because you're including like how it's contributing for you being a better physician, right? Another like side note is that make sure that your experiences, you did them consistently. It doesn't really matter if you went and you did like one little thing for 3 hours and you never touched it again, right? Like, oh yeah, I went to that one canned food drive that one time, like for 2 hours for 5 months ago. You know what I mean? Like you need something that's consistent. They would rather, like AdComs would rather you do something like once every 2 months, but for like 3 years, or something regular, maybe like over a year, you did something every month or every 2 months or something like that. They want to see longevity and consistency more than just like, oh, random bursts, right? Because that's the first red flag. It's like, how come she or he can't commit to anything, right? Do they really care about it? Are they doing it just for the hours? So I made sure to not list anything in my application that I didn't do consistently at least over 6 months. If you're like if you don't have experiences like that are like that, then of course include them. But this is just for something for you to keep in mind when you are seeking out different experiences, whether that be leadership, volunteer, scribing, whatever, right? Okay. So for research activities, this is like a doozy, but basically like, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically you can describe what your research was. So then I talked about like what my research was, what the nature of it was, what my role was in it, right? So I was principal investigator. If you were a research assistant, write that, things like that, and make sure you include the hours. And then they asked if you did any publications, posters, or presentations. Totally okay if you haven't yet. If you have, make sure you include it and make sure you talk about like future presentations. So I had presented my research. So I detailed what date it was. I said exactly what my findings were actually, like not just, oh, I researched like barriers inside South Asian American healthcare. I said what my primary findings were. Like they said that confidentiality, things like that. So that they have kind of a product in front of them, not just like, oh yeah, I did this, but like I actually did something, you know? Okay. Healthcare activities. This is going to be like hopefully your heaviest one. Also, I think honestly, this entire like all of these sections genuinely took me the most time on my application, more than even my personal statement. Because like you're rearranging, like, should I put this under employment? Should I put this under that? Blah, blah, blah. But honestly, like when you read it and the first like instinct you get that this seems like a healthcare activity, not like a volunteer activity, then you do that. So then your healthcare activity section is going to include community service, any volunteer experience, employment, shadowing, anything like that. That all goes under healthcare activities. So for my scribing experience, you just have to write your location, whatever date, how many hours. They want to see a lot of hours for an activity. Like I didn't scribe for a bunch of different people. I scribed for one person, but consistently, you know. And then description. So yeah, I said where he works, what he did. I said what I learned. I said I learned medical terminology, how to quickly write a SOAP note, and then also things that I observed. So I observed many procedures like administering anesthesia, cervical and colonial steroid injections, and ketamine infusions. So those are like the technical words where it's like, what are the actual things that I did? But then I also include a sentence saying, I also learned how to understand patient behavior. So make sure you're centering, again, this is a recurring theme, right? Make sure you're centering each of your descriptions about what you learned, how you grew as a person, the specific things that you observed, right? And then like IVT volunteer trip, I volunteered in Peru for like a week. And so then I did like third world country volunteering, shadowing, things like that. So then I made sure to talk about that, where it's like, well, this was a future activity, I hadn't done it yet. But it's like, I hope to expand my knowledge on healthcare reform and medicine in third world countries. So it's like things that you want to learn more about. If you have like new things like that, make sure you talk about them and things like that. And you want to make it as diverse as possible.
So, so that, it seems like you did this, after you like senior year. Right? This was, you know, 320 hours are, then for these, normally, when you're in the school, you cannot do that many hours.
So I did the 320 hours. This was during COVID. So I did it during COVID,
Which year you were?
my sophomore year. All right, question will be at the end, but I did it sophomore year.
Oh,
Yay. Okay, and then community service related activities are obviously like non-healthcare related. So this isn't going to be volunteering at a clinic or anything like that, anything else. And I would really strongly encourage y'all to find different things like that. One, it's very fulfilling and it's good to show that you're not just volunteering in medicine, because the whole volunteer aspect of your application really is to show your altruism and putting others above yourself, right? So whatever I talked about whenever I served in like a soup kitchen. So then it's like, not just I serve soup in a kitchen and whatever. I talked more about like, I was amazed with the stories that they had to tell and deeply empathize with them. I'm excited to continue to connect and develop new relationships with them. So like, again, personal aspect, I'm repeating myself, moving on. Okay, extracurriculars, again, so this is less about like the orgs that you're involved with on campus, because you can usually incorporate that with leadership. But if you didn't serve a leadership position with them and it's not healthcare related, then you can put it to this extracurricular section. So like I literally just love to plan events. Like I planned my sister's wedding, I planned my sister's block party, like I'm always the person to plan stuff, right? So then I talked about that. Literally you could talk about anything that you like to do. And like over COVID, I wanted to learn how to sew, so I learned how to quilt. So then my second one was quilt making. And so they want to see that like you also kind of have a life outside of medicine and you have skills that you want to like expand on, and they want to see that you have like an initiative to want to do new things, right? So the whole reason I included the quilt making thing is like, yeah, I could have rotted away in my room during COVID and just like slept all day, but I learned how to quilt, you know, and it was cool. And then I also incorporated how it refined my fine motor skills, because that's so important in so many things in medicine when it comes to surgery or anything like that. And like event planning, I coordinate food vendors, decor, activities. Like since I was little, I've always enjoyed helping out working parties and more than attending them. So I'm talking about event planning, but I'm talking about how I take initiative. I like to take leadership. I like organization. I like coordinating multiple things, like being a natural leader. So literally take something as stupid as event planning. It's not stupid, it's fun. But like take it to highlight your initiative and your leadership and stuff like that. Same with quilt making. That's also initiative, fine motor skills. Okay, employment. Basically, your employment also doesn't have to be medical related. If your employment was medical related, you would have it under your healthcare activities. But like I had work that wasn't healthcare related. And honestly, I had people in my interviews ask me about it, where like, I was a brand ambassador for Maybelline. Like I did like makeup and stuff. You think that that's not relevant to makeup at all, but I also incorporated that as fine motor skills, fine makeup on others. Like things like 1 of 20 people selected, like social media content, like doing things like that, where that highlights a different aspect of yourself in a way that also shows that like this girl is going to be good for medicine, not just because she's able to slave away in a lab, but she has other social skills and things like that. Same thing with like tutor. Tutor is also academic related, but it talks about like my last sentence is, this taught me to be a compassionate educator, which is essential as a physician, because all physicians are educators at the end of the day. But I remember my biggest problem was I always talk about how much I love teaching. But then people would always be like, so why not be a teacher? Like, why are you trying to be like a physician? Being a teacher is totally fine, but I had to justify like why I want to be a physician, not just a teacher. And I did that through, again, plugging in why it would help me be a better doctor rather than being a better educator. Last thing, I think, so you have these meaningful experiences essays, right? These are really mini essays. They call it an essay, it's not an essay. I can't remember how many characters it was, but you have 3 that you can talk about, right? In those 3 experiences, you can just list out like, I was on the board for MSA. I found it rewarding because I got to play on Pelicans. I really liked it and I love my faith. You can talk about that. That'd be great, right? But you need to also, you can write it in that format, but to take it a step further, you can introduce it with a little anecdote to tell a little story, right? And so this is like, I started this work, right? So I was like, Sarah approached me in tears at the library and said attending one of our abusing abuse virtual seminars gave her the strength to walk away from her abusive relationship. Abusing abuse has a significant meaning to me because of interactions like these. It made me want to make people comfortable being vulnerable, as I hoped to do so as a physician. It also motivated me to continue empowering people with stories like Sarah because of how much of a difference it can make in someone's life. So I could have just said what abusing abuse was, why it was meaningful, but I started it off with like an anecdote, like a sentence introducing what that experience was like. Because whenever you're reading it, it feels like for me, and I feel like a lot of people, they feel like the personal statement is too short. Like you have so much more to say about yourself, and those 3 essays, you have stuff that you can't fit about yourself in there, right? But things like this, whether that be a description for an activity or your meaningful experiences mini essays, those are just more word opportunities for you to say more about who you are as a person, right? And to tell your story. So I think that's all for my section right now. Or is it? My goodness. Okay, sorry. I'm tired of my own voice right now. Okay, so planned activities is self-explanatory, literally anything that you're planning to do. It's super duper important because if you're applying your junior year and you still have an entire year of undergrad left, you're definitely gonna have stuff that you're planning. So like the trip to Peru that I took for volunteering, I actually hadn't done it yet. I was planning on doing it that following summer. And so then they were able to see what I'm going to learn, or like I'm like this org, I'm going to serve inside this way, or literally anything. I will say you do want to have your biggest things done before you apply, because you can't like, let's say you have no like healthcare experience, and then you say, okay, I'm gonna shadow, I'm gonna volunteer, I'm gonna do this, blah, blah, blah. They kind of want to see a good bulk of it already done. And then the plan thing is just to highlight that like, oh, I'm still committed to doing it. I'm not just gonna drop face and not do anything, right? And so, yeah, it's a good place to show that you have longevity inside your stride and stuff like that. But all in all, just to sum everything up, your applications is to tell you who you are as a person, right? And to convince them that you are a multifaceted individual that is so qualified inside so many different ways, and you have more to you, right? And that's so true. Like it just is true in general. Like you're a person before you're a physician, you're a person before you're anything else, right? And so they want to know that you're not crazy. You're not like a sociopath that just like does lab work all day and doesn't know how to talk to a patient. You know what I mean? They want to know that you're like a person, you know? And so talk about who you are as a person. Sahar said that your 3 main essays should tie in together. You can be super passionate about global health, super passionate about lab research, super passionate about all these things, but you can't be all over the place. You know, you can say have a wide range of like interests and curiosities and stuff, right? But you need to kind of hone in your story and kind of like, you know what I mean? Like you need to kind of have something cohesive, because like this girl doesn't know what she wants now. How is she ever going to figure it out? You know? Anyways.
Okay, and just a quick point about all of these activities. I know it seems like a lot. These are meant to be done throughout your undergraduate years, so it can't be before you started college. So if you're in high school right now, keep doing these activities, keep doing these experiences, because that's what's going to get you into college. But for your medical school application, it has to be from when you've started college up until you're applying, and then the year after.
This is true. But the caveat with this is if you are doing an experience that you're continuing from high school through college, you're allowed to talk about it. It just shouldn't be something like you did this thing in high school. And
that was it.
Yeah, that was it. If it continues through college, you're allowed to talk about it.
And I think your total hours count after you start undergrad, but you could definitely mention and talk about how I've been involved with this since high school, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you. Okay. So, all right, well, moving on to letters of recommendation. So as mentioned before, for the TMD-SAS, you have to submit at minimum 3 letters, at most 4 letters of recommendation. So that can be some schools have what's called a Health Profession Advising Committee, or HPAC for short. So Umber will talk about this a little bit more because she submitted an HPAC letter, but I did not. So you can either submit one of those HPAC packets or submit 3 to 4 individual letters.
Okay, yeah. So basically, like some schools offer HPAC and some schools don't. So I went to SMU, they had like a health recommendation committee. I know UTD has it, but UT did not have that system. There's a couple schools that just don't have it. So it will not be held against you at all if your school does not have that option. Basically, it's just like there's a health committee or a pre-health committee, and they get together and then they evaluate you as a candidate and they say, do we want to recommend the student or not, right? So they'll never like submit a letter on your behalf saying we do not recommend this candidate, but like you have to be accepted into that HPAC like program. I don't know how else to describe it, for them to write you a committee rec and then a committee recommendation letter. And they also assemble the rest of your rec letters for you and they submit it for you. But if you go to a school that has an HPAC program, but you didn't get that letter, there is a part in your application that says, if you had that program and you didn't, why didn't you have that? So it can hurt you if you had that option and you didn't do it. So there's so many times where I was like, bro, screw this, I'm not about to do this. Like, I don't want to have another application, another thing to be chosen for, like I'm done, you know? But definitely it can be held against you if you have that, but definitely not a big deal. Usually it consists of like some interviews, you submit a preliminary med school app, which was good for me because, and good for everyone because they were able to kind of get things together way before like the application deadline, like the application open. But then they like have a series of interviews, and then if you get selected, then they recommend you. But anyway.
Okay, so if your school doesn't have an HVAC committee, then you want to request letters from your professors, your TAs, your graduate student assistants, faculty, any other faculty, employers, mentors, whoever, anyone who can write you a good letter of recommendation. Now, what do I say when I mean good letter of recommendation? That's going to be someone who knows you well, who knows you not just as a student, but as a person as well. So you're not going to probably request a letter of recommendation from someone who's only known you for like 2 weeks, right? So that's someone who knows you on a personal level, and they can guarantee you that they'll write you a favorable letter that'll paint you in a good light and for you to be a medical student, and then down the line a good position as well. One thing I do want to mention before is that it's in your favor to waive the right to read these letters, because that adds credibility to what's being said in those letters. If you don't waive the right, then it's going to seem like, well, you were a part of that letter making process, and then you perhaps wrote it in a way that makes you sound favorable, and that doesn't add much credibility. It's not going to help you pretty much for the application system. So that's why I say you want to ask someone who you can trust is going to write a favorable letter of recommendation for you. Out of the 3 to 4 people that you choose, one person does have to be a science faculty. So I know some of you are in college right now, in undergrad right now. Try to go to your professor's office hours, email them, try to get to introduce yourself face to face so they know who you are, because you do need one letter of recommendation from them. Some people will also, what they'll do is they'll get close with your TA, get a recommendation from their TA, but then the professor will co-sign the letter. So that works as well. You do want to request these letters early on. So the TMD-SAS, I believe the earliest you can submit it is mid-May, right? Yes, mid-May. So I would give at least 1 month, if not 2 months pre-advance request your letter writers early on to for this letter, because they have a life outside of just writing this letter, right? They got a job, they have their own personal life and all of that. You want to give them as much time as possible to write that letter of recommendation. When you try to rush them in the end and try to get them to write it in 2 weeks, first of all, it's not even going to be good quality, and then you're not even able to see what they wrote, so it could end up hurting you in that end. So you do want to give them plenty of time to go ahead and write that letter about you.
Keep in mind, especially for, so there are 2 things actually. So one is I was a nutritional sciences student, and nutrition did not count as a science. So a lot of my professors, some of them did not count as a science rec, and some of them did. So if you are in a program like that is not officially a science, make sure you check. That's number 1. Number 2 is a lot of the overview that we're trying to do. You have to think about this as you are one amongst many medical school applicants. And part of asking for a letter of recommendation is also keeping in mind that if you go to a large school like UT, there are so many students that are in the same boat as you that are also asking for a letter. So a lot of professors will get overwhelmed. So that's why it's important to, again, always be early advance. And then I guess a sub point of this is consider what professor you're asking for a rec letter from. So for instance, Bio 1, Bio 2, Chem 1, Chem 2 tend to be the biggest lecture classes offered at a university institution. And so those professors, unless you are unique and you happen to get to know them very well, try to avoid just going for a general lecture professor. Go for a professor that maybe it was only a 20 to 50 student class. You tend to have more professor interactions that way. So that's more important, and you need to be considering these types of things. Or if you TA'd for a professor, I was a biochemistry TA. I was able to ask the professor that I TA'd for, even though I didn't take her biochemistry class, I was able to ask her. So there are a lot of different, again, it's very, very important to be getting them from people who actually know you, you're not just one of the many.
Just adding on to that, I actually was going to say the same thing. I also asked my biochemistry professor who I TA'd for. So even though it's a large class, she knew me because I was the teaching assistant for her. And I thought about it in advance. And I was like, I'm planning on asking her for a letter of recommendation. So for example, I applied at the end of my junior year of college. So beginning of my second semester of junior year, I made sure to reach out and ask and ahead of time, like many months ahead of time. And I was like, hey, I know it's a little early, but I wanted to ask you if you would be willing to write me a letter of recommendation for my medical school applications at the end of this semester. I just wanted to ask in advance. Also, it kind of, you beat out the rest of the students who ask later in the semester, for example. So you're kind of first on their list at that point.
Yeah, I think lab professors are really good to reach out to because they see you in the lab, like working and stuff, and you get sometimes get more one-on-one experience with them. Where like, I don't know, you're doing a titration, you're like, oh, can you help me with this? So that you get actual interaction with them. I don't know how at some schools if it's mostly TAs that you interact with. I don't know, my school like it was
Okay,
TA.
Like SMU.
Yeah, it was a really small school, so we were able to. But regardless, yeah, find the smallest class that you can, and then like office hours are your best friend. Like if you feel like you don't have an opportunity to talk to your professor, go to office hours, even if you have no questions. Go to office hours, talk to the professor that they know your face. So when you ask for a recommendation, it's not like I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
That'll help.
And it's not a bad thing to, get closer to professor because with the intention of getting a letter of recommendation, it's fine. All of us did it. We have to. When we're trying to get into medical school, it's completely fine. But as Umber mentioned, even if you don't have anything to say, anything to ask, just go to their office hours, just show your face, introduce yourself, try to get to know them on a one-on-one basis, and that's going to help you a lot as well. When you're later on trying to request a letter of recommendation. And then a lot of people will use so it's a service that will store your letters, and it's called Interfolio. You do have to pay for a 1-year subscription for it, but basically what you'll do is you'll send a link to each of your letter writers, and they'll with some sort of due date, but and then they will upload the letter onto Interfolio through that link, and then it'll store it for you until you're ready to submit it along with your application. So later on, when you're submitting your TMDSAS, through Interfolio, you can send the letters directly to TMDSAS, and it'll be safe and secure, and it'll remain confidential as well. I know it sucks that you have to pay for another subscription service, but it's definitely worth it because I know some people, like, inshallah, this is not the case for any of us, but if you're not able to get in the application cycle the first time, then because Interfolio stores your letters for 1 year, you can use it the next application cycle as well. And you don't have to keep bothering your professors or whoever, your letter writers, to send the letters again. So I definitely recommend getting Interfolio. And then again, your professors, your employers, your directors, anyone who's writing, your letter writers are taking so much time and dedication to write these good letters of recommendation for you. So even though, it seems like you don't have to say this, but you should follow up and write them a thank you letter, send them a thank you email if you can't see them in person, just to show appreciation for the time and dedication they took to write you that letter of recommendation.
Okay, so some general takeaways, because we gave y'all a lot of information today. These are our biggest points that we think you should keep in mind, that are little tips that'll help you out in the long run. Like we just said, ask your professors or whoever you're asking for their letter recommendations, ask them early. Or apply to your health advising committee early as well, if that's something that is offered at your school. I know there are a lot of UT Dallas students here right now. I believe it is offered at your school. Look into that. Make sure you keep up with the timeline because you don't want to miss out on that. Another point, keep track of all of your activities that you do throughout college. Keep track on a spreadsheet or in a journal. I know for me, when I started school, I actually had a physical. I don't use anything physical anymore. Everything's on my laptop. But I had a physical notebook, and I wrote down every activity that I did that I would keep up with, and any little experiences that I had. Like, for example, in my shadowing experiences, if I had a patient that stood out to me, I would write a little bit about that and what I learned from it, and how many hours I did, and as well as my volunteering opportunities, all of that, I would keep track in a notebook. It just helps when you get to this point. As you saw, Umber went through everything, every section, and she only gave you like one example per section. It's a lot. That part is probably one of the longest parts of your application process. It makes it easier in the long run when you have things written out or on a spreadsheet. It makes it handy. Another point, taking your MCAT ahead of time. I know some people like to push off their MCAT, but it will take away the stress if you take your MCAT in the January of your junior, or let's say you're applying end of junior year. Taking it in January is when a lot of people do it, or even taking it the summer before. Our biggest tip is take it right after you take biochemistry. So I took biochemistry my second semester of sophomore year, and I studied all summer, and I took my MCAT at the end of the summer. And so take it ahead of time. Don't take it in April. I mean, if something happens, you know, obviously Allahu Alam, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and you're forced to do that, inshallah, it'll be okay. It'll be fine. It's just a good tip to keep in mind early. Try to take your MCAT early, plan for it ahead of time. Yeah, go for it.
Like some people will end up taking their MCAT, like their first MCAT, and then they're forced to submit it blindly because they have to do that because they took it in like April or something, and they're planning on applying that cycle, which it started in May, which it starts the following May, like the next month. And what really sucks about that is that one, you don't even know what your score is going to be, and then you can't reuse your essays or anything. Like your personal statement, your secondaries, all of that stuff, you can't recycle them if you have to apply again. So if you're blindly applying and you don't even know what your MCAT score is, and you don't know if it's competitive for the schools that you're trying to apply for, you wasted your entire application. You have to start all over. So like, I know that sometimes you have to do that, and like some people feel like they have to, but personally, I know a lot of people, some people might not agree with me on this, but I would rather you take a gap year then, and then like take it again when you know what your score is going to be, because you don't want to waste your entire application where now you're doing your entire personal statement again and being like, how do I make it different? My story's still the same, you know? Anyways, that's just something. It's because I've been seeing a lot more people like apply blindly without like even knowing what their MCAT's going to be, and I just don't think that's worth it personally.
It depends for the school, each school.
TCOM, it's like 509, 510.
Yeah.
Do you want to tap back to
Which slide?
the schools?
Yeah. One more thing.
Okay.
Yeah, one more thing, your MCAT scores do come back 4 weeks later. So that's how you want to plan when to take your MCAT, you know, way ideally before you submit your
Yeah.
application, but that's something to keep in mind.
Okay, so when it comes to school competitiveness, schools are decided as competitive or non-competitive based off of their stats, so their MCAT and GPA. So the three most stats-wise competitive schools in Texas include Southwestern, Baylor, and Long School of Medicine. And so these schools have the highest MCAT scores. I believe Southwestern's is a 516.
Like 16,
516, 517. Long School of Medicine is a 518. I remember that one being high. And Baylor's is also 516, 517. The next kind of like mid-tier includes McGovern, includes Texas Tech. No, it includes McGovern, includes Dell.
Yeah, QTMB.
That includes Dell. That includes UTMB, so Johnson School of Medicine, University of Texas Medicine at Galveston. And those three are kind of more mid-tier. Those MCAT scores tend to be around a 512, 511, 512, 513. I'd say the next tier would include A&M, Texas Tech at Lubbock, the main A&M, or the main Texas Tech, and I would say those have an MCAT around 511, 510, 511. And then the next you would have Texas Tech, El Paso, and honestly, I would say even the osteopathic medicine, the osteopathic schools, they tend to have MCAT ranges around 509, 510, right?
Yeah.
And the way that schools, the way that outcomes have explained to me before, that MCATs work is that you're considered to be in a certain tier, based off of what your score is. So 505 to like 508 tends to be one tier.
Definition of the GPA, the MCAT.
So GPA is, so GPA is different, but of course GPA has a lot of different aspects to it. But specifically discussing MCAT, There's a 505 to 508 range, and there's a 508 to 510 range, then a 510 to 512, and that going, and then so on and so forth until.
What do you suggest to those?
I think as long as you push for above a 509, you'll be fine. Like you're super safe if you push for 509 above, like
So max, max.
528. So above 509, I think you're pretty safe.
Oh, and then you're going to Harvard.
I will say though, so a 520 to a 528 on the MCAT scale is the top 1 percentile of everyone who
nation,
takes it, yeah, in the nation. So just keep that in mind. I know it seems like a lot of points there, but it's a very small subset of people who take it. Another point, just try your best, absolute best on MCAT. Like we were saying, 509, 510 will put you in the safe zone, but every school has a full range. It doesn't mean you have to get a 515 on the MCAT to get into a certain school, or a 510 to get into TCOM, or a 516 to get into UT Southwestern, because you will find people in your class who are as low as a certain score or as high as a certain score that you would see from other schools. It's just a matter of, if you're shooting for this school, shoot for this average MCAT score.
And it's an average for.
It's an average. So the average means there's a range. Yeah, exactly. So just research the school. All those averages are actually online. I believe the AAMC has a system that gives you the averages. If you just Google, like, let's say you want to go to Southwestern, Google it, Google average MCAT score for matriculants. Average MCAT score for applicants is a different situation. You want to Google it for. Oh, yeah, go for it.
I also didn't include scores on purpose on these slides because I did not want to psych anyone out. Scores are your foot in the door. They are not everything. And the purpose of this whole program is to talk about the application, which is you as a holistic individual. And that's inshallah for what we have accomplished here today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You are more than your MCAT.
Exactly.
So is the degree, so I'm thinking some people also come from science.
Yeah.
They are coming from the business school.
Yeah, you
What
can
is
be,
the
you can be,
importance of a degree that catches the bio, or it can be any as long as you are qualifying with GPA, is that okay?
you can literally major in anything and everything that you want as long as you complete the prereqs. So some schools, the core prereqs are very similar. Some require like one additional, one below or whatever. But like literally, I know people that were music majors and just took the prereqs on the side. I majored in human rights. I also majored in bio, but like a lot of my classes were human rights, you know? And so honestly, I personally, we can talk about this later, but like, I would love for y'all to do other majors, you know what I mean? And do your prereqs, because honestly, like you're never gonna have a chance to study anything other than science and before med school until like after med school. So do it, and it makes you look different, and you learn so different. And like in so many of my interviews, they ask me about my human rights degree, where it's like, what did you learn from that? Because they want like advocates, they want people that are technical in computer science, they want all those things, not just bio people.
Yeah. And like, for example, I was a biochemistry major in college, and a lot of people, they'll take a science-based degree because it makes it easier to do your prerequisites for medical school. Some people are just really interested in it. They have like a backup job in case they don't want to do medicine in the future. Like for me, I just loved biochem. I ended up teaching it as a teaching assistant for 2 years, like for the second half of my degree. So it's really just what you make of it. Do what you're interested in. If you want something easier where you can take the prerequisites for your degree, do that. It's just, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. You just have to get the prerequisite courses and the MCAT, and then have your GPA up there. So
As long as any undergraduate degree, as long as you have to do.
as long as you have the prerequisites, yeah.
One more thing.
And yeah,
Sorry. One more thing I want to mention about the GPA. So for medical schools, a lot of medical schools, they'll look at your overall GPA, depending whatever major you took, but depending on that, and then they recalculate your science GPA. And your science GPA is all of your prereq classes that you took for medical school. So I think it's a range.
Yeah, it's a
definitely a range. Yeah.
Not 3.8.
Yeah, 3.8 is very high. Yeah, don't want to freak anyone out. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good question, because okay, here's my take on it. I did take a lot of AP classes in high school, including the science classes, but the only ones that I counted towards my degree were the non-science classes, because that's something that medical schools aren't like, it's not a part of the prerequisites that are as important as the science courses. So for example, I took credit for English, I took credit for the histories, I took credit for government, et cetera, but I had also taken biology and chemistry, and I had the credit for it from my AP courses, but you want to retake them in college so they see that you took it with the same rigor that the college offers for you, and that you did well, and it better prepares you for the MCAT in the future. So highly recommend, if you do have dual credit or AP courses credits from high school, if you want, claim that credit as long as it's not science, take the science classes at your undergraduate institution.
Pre-match and match day, how many, you know, like that percentage of applicants that are accepted?
It varies school to school. Some schools like to pre-match more than other schools, and some like barely pre-match people.
Overall, for TMDSAS, for all of the TMDSAS applicants, so every school, it's 15% pre-match.
But don't freak out if you don't I know so many people who didn't pre-match anywhere, and they like I barely know anybody like that pre-matched. So not a big deal at all if you don't pre-match.
Yeah. Pre-matching is really just like relief ahead of time, because they make you wait until match day, which is that first Friday of March every year. So if you do get a pre-match, alhamdulillah. If not, that's normal. That's the rest of the applicants.
Yeah.
So
that's 85%. To one thing. How many of y'all here are high school students? Or parents of? Can you like,
or just raise your hand higher, please.
Like, high. Okay, cool. And how many like parents of high school students that are repping? There's okay. Cool. So for y'all, one thing I really wanted to add on for the dual credit. So there are two types of college credits you can get. One is dual credit, well, IB and dual credit. And then there's also, IB and AP, and then there's dual credit. So these are separate different things. Dual credit is a college credit. You're taking it through usually community college, but you can also take it through, I know UT has dual credit opportunities now as well. Those classes stay on your college transcript for forever. So if you're taking a rigorous course that is dual credit, that stuff will be going on your application. I personally, I'll tell like, it's fine. I'm done here now. I was 16 years old. I took intro to anatomy and physiology, and it was a 4-hour credit, and I performed poorly on it. And that stuff stayed on my transcript. It tanked my GPA when I was applying medical school. And it was such a stressful experience. So in advance, I always try to warn people, if you're a high school student, you're taking a dual credit course, be careful with what you're taking and be mindful of how that's going to be on your transcript. If you're getting a C, you need to cue that. You need to cue drop that. You need to get rid of that. Try to avoid having these things, because stuff, you don't think about your college and your med school application stuff until way later when you're 15, 16 years old. But then it comes back later and it bites you in the butt. So if you're taking dual credit, be very careful with what rigorous science courses specifically that you are taking. And then if you're taking AP credits and you have all of those, alhamdulillah, and you have the 3s and the 4s and the 5s to be getting college credit, we recommend, as Sahar said, that you claim credits, just get you can work faster towards your degree if you have your non-sciences out of the way, but for your science credits, you really should retake them like that. Yep. So, and that's just to prep you, and it also shows that you took it at a 4-year institution. A lot of med schools do care that you took rigorous science courses at a 4-year institution.
Yeah, on that note, I just want to bounce off her and say something real quick. So I know some of us like to take summer classes at like community college. You want to get physics out of the way at community college because it's easy. You don't want to take it at your institution, but it can come back to bite you in the butt, because again, medical schools, they prefer you take these pre-reg science classes at 4-year institutions. So, you know, it might be more difficult at your college, at UTD, or wherever you go at UT, but in the end, if you just try to, you know, because it's cheap or it's just faster, you try to take it at a community college over the summer, that's not so beneficial. And again, it might not prepare you so well for the MCAT, which is a big factor.
Yeah, like I took physics over the summer, but I didn't take it at a community college. I took it at UTA. So like, because it was cheaper at UTA, SMU was crazy. And so then I did that, but it didn't like harm my application because it was a 4-year institution. So definitely, yeah, I wouldn't recommend taking like classes over the summer at a community college because they will think that it's less rigor, even if it's for science, I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, everyone has their own thing, like. I know a lot of people that it works out for.
Yeah, it works out. And again, you want to take those core science classes at a university, at a four-year institution. A lot of people will take prereqs. I know for Texas, you have to take government, English, all of these at a community college. And that can be a good option for some people, right? Because it's, you know, it's financially favorable.
Yeah.
But again, in the end, science classes at a four-year institution.
Yeah, that's where it actually counts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some students also try to do a master's, 1 year master's, 2 year master's, and then they will apply for med school. How would you say how are they important, or 1 year master's should be good, 2 years should be good, and you know, how are they?
I would say it doesn't really matter how many gap years you take. It's gonna sound crazy, but in our class we have someone who was previously a priest and then he decided to go to med school. Like, how many gap years is that? But it doesn't really matter how many gap years you use. It's more how do you use those gap years? You know, what do you do during that time to work towards a career in medicine? What do you do to embellish your application? So it's a personal choice. I took a gap year. I think the three of you didn't take a gap year, but I did, and it's just because it was after COVID, I needed a break and I wanted to add more activities to my application. So I used that 1 gap year to do that. But
so personally, I think masters and post-bac only matters if your GPA was not good. Like if you had a good GPA, but like your MCAT wasn't good or you didn't have like clinical experiences, then a master's or a post-bac program would be good for you. But like only if your GPA is like that, because then the classes that you took for your master's or your post-baccalaureate bachelor program, or whatever, those will then bring your GPA up actually. But then you're wasting your time if like your GPA was fine, you know?
So doing the master's program, and they combine that GPA or they consider it separate?
There's a post-bac GPA.
Post-bac GPA. And then whenever they calculate like your BCPA, which is your biochem, physics, and I don't know what A is. Yeah, your science GPA, whenever they calculate it, then it will bring it up.
And just the last note, because you asked about like 1 versus 2 years of a master's difference, it just depends on the program that you're doing. So some master's programs are 1 year, some are 2. It doesn't matter which one you do whatever master's program that you're interested in. And because you're doing more schooling to like bring up your GPA anyway, might as well do something that you're interested in. So the 1 versus 2 year doesn't really make a difference.
One thing to also consider, you mentioned a lot, how many gap years. After a certain point, I think it's after 2, you are considered a non-traditional applicant.
Yeah.
So there is a traditional applicant, which is you go to college, you either apply for med school for immediate matriculation upon graduation, or you take a gap year and you're still considered a traditional applicant. But after a certain point, I think after completing a master's, or if you, for any of my aunties in the crowd who want to go into med school now later in life, like you can still do it. Like, you're considered a non-traditional applicant. And so you didn't just graduate from, you're not like 21, 22 years old, essentially, in that range.
And that doesn't necessarily hurt your application. It just means that you have different experiences compared to
and you're unique.
You're unique, which makes you stand out, and it actually helps you out sometimes.
Finish the slides really fast.
Yeah.
Wait, let's just finish the slides really quick.
Yeah, really quickly. I'm just gonna give the last 2 points and then we'll open up to Q&A. This is all it is. Don't put off your secondary applications. I know we didn't get in depth on secondary applications, but basically after you submit that first primary application that opens up in May, it's going to be around a month of processing where TMDSAS takes your application and then they send it out to each individual medical school that they offer, which were on the slides earlier. After that's been processed and every school receives your application, they're going to send you an email to fill out a secondary application, which is basically like mini essays from that individual school that you have to complete. And you're going to get one from almost every school in the state. There are some schools that are invite only. I believe Dell, UT Austin Dell is invite only, as well as Long
Long doesn't
doesn't
have
have a secondary.
Some video.
San Antonio does not have a secondary application. You'll get into the depths of that later, but whenever you do receive these secondary applications, expect to turn them around and send them in as soon as possible. People like to say within 2 weeks of receiving them, and I know they're going to get repetitive because a lot of the essay prompts for each school are very similar, because they ask about specific details that you've experienced, like can you talk about a time that you experienced something difficult in your life? What happened? What did you get out of it? That could come from UT McGovern in Houston, but then you're probably going to see it again on a different application, secondary application from a different school. So just keep in mind, be on top of those. They're going to be short. They're going to be like 300 words on average, and they're going to be around 2 to 3 per school. The details you can find online when you get there, but just stay on top of those because you want to turn them in as soon as possible. And then lastly, don't compare yourself to others. I know, like, when I was going through pre-medical throughout college, I was surrounded by people who also wanted to go to medical school, and it was just everyone always talking about their GPA and their MCAT scores and what activities they were doing. And honestly, it's a detriment to your mental health overall. It's already a tough process, and it's okay to admit that it's a tough process. To the parents out here, it's not easy to get into medical school here. The system is different, and it's a lot that you have to do. Like, you saw all the activities we have to do in 4 years, and it's okay that it's difficult. The whole point is you get through it and you get in, inshallah. So don't worry about what other people are doing. Focus on what you're doing. Do the best that you possibly can do. It will show on your application if you're really passionate about it. Inshallah, it'll all work out in the end. So those are all the points that we have. We'll open up to Q&A now. Good question.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's true.
Just to repeat the question, he was asking about the grading system, because we know that some undergraduates have A- and B+ for their grading systems. Whenever TMDSAS calculates your GPA, they will count a B- and a B+ as a B, and they'll count an A- or an A+ as an A. So whenever they calculate your GPA, it'll be based off A, B, C instead of the plus minuses.
No. So
So I was gonna ask about.
I know Texas Tech Lubbock, a BSMD program.
Oh.
Texas Tech Lubbock has a BSMD program. I think UTD used to partner with Southwestern for a BSMD, but that no longer exists. So I think the only program in Texas to mine. Oh wait, I think Rice and Baylor has one.
I think they can't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay,
So
then
literally
it's
it's
just
only
Tech.
Texas Tech Lubbock now.
Yes. Yeah, so the question was, are there BSMD programs? And as of right now, so Umber said Texas Tech,
Lubbock,
in Lubbock, but there's also the JAMP program that constitutes
That's true.
BSMD right now. I believe it's like if you're in a certain
UNT has it. Yeah, UNT has
Yeah,
a jam
Southwestern
program.
also has JAM. Basically, if you have a certain socioeconomic if you're disadvantaged socioeconomically, then there's certain like qualifications and stuff like that that you can apply for. You apply for that during undergrad, and then during undergrad, right? Not
Yeah.
before. Or in high school, and then basically you have guaranteed med school admission as long as you like maintain certain criteria.
So I think that's not mostly applied to people.
Yeah,
Not from
Disadvantaged.
yeah,
Yeah,
disadvantaged.
yeah, they're disadvantaged.
Hispanic, other.
There's a lot of brown people too. It just honestly depends. Yeah.
Financial and there's a lot of.
Yeah. Socioeconomic factors. Let's get her question for
Yeah.
the purple hijab.
Oh. Yes, I'm so sorry.
Can you please elaborate on the socioeconomic situation for the student? I mean, for the JAMP admissions qualification?
I mean, so some people do a post-bac instead of master's, because post-bac is literally just like an extended bachelor program, right? And where you just take some extra classes and it contributes. I wouldn't say that like that's why I said earlier that like if you had like a pretty like not competitive GPA, then it would help because it'd be better than if you didn't do that at all. You know what I mean? But if those classes are science related, then that would help you. Does that make sense?
The management courses don't sound like science.
Yeah.
So that
So
would
that's
be-
why, yeah.
That's probably why. But again, like all of us did a very like traditional route where only Shawana took a gap year, but the rest of us immediately matriculated. So we will only like be able to like take it with a grain of salt. Like we won't be able to like have all the answers.
But for my friends who've taken gap years and for different reasons, everybody has so many different reasons. And people assume that people take a gap year because they didn't have good grades. Some people literally just take because they just want to enjoy life before they like end their life, you know? And then two, like some people just want to have more experiences and make sure that's what they want. And so, yeah, I think that when it comes to just like the, what was it? Yeah, anyways, I think that science related classes post like whatever graduation, that will help you.
Green.
Yeah,
What-
I just want to
What-
say you guys did a phenomenal job today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being able.
What is considered a competitive GPA? I'm sorry, could I ask one last
Thank
question?
you. When I wasn't in college station, you would be sitting here with me, but I am going to ask you to listen to the recording. My question is, if you can just talk a little bit about the interview process for satellite.
Oh, interview process.
This whole other workshop.
Yeah, then that's another workshop.
I guess, but give you like a mini summary. There's like two different kinds of interview formats, basically. So there's what is it? MMI, which is multiple mini interviews, and then there's what's it called, like 2 point, or what is it? It's just like a one-on-one, yeah, traditional one-on-one interview. So multiple mini interviews. Well, I think I interviewed during COVID. So my interviews were virtual. Were your interviews?
We were all virtual.
Yeah, we were all virtual. I think now they're going back to in person. But anyways, for multiple mini interviews, you have these little like stations, basically with the different faculties. Someone on the interview panel, and they'll give you a prompt. They'll give you anything. It can be related to anything. There's it's like a huge range. You can find these prompts online that you can practice for before the interview. They'll give you a prompt and they'll give you, let's say like 30 seconds to a minute to just brainstorm your answer. And then you have a certain time period, like let's say you have 5 minutes to just talk and answer the prompt. You talk for as long as you want. And then if you finish within the 5 minutes, and you move on to the next station. If you finish before, they will ask you follow-up questions to get you to talk a little bit more. And then
I think this program is only for application process.
Yeah.
Because it takes too long.
okay.
Interview process, we can have another one for that purpose only, but that's a very vast. interview
Yeah,
process.
there's just so much
That's
that
how-
goes along with it.
We do a Zoom program, we only have a whole bunch of YouTube programs about all this program.
Yeah.
Just Dr. Ask us a person to do this program at the state of us, so we did it, and these are such nice, well, young women, young future physicians who came all the way, long way, on this hard way to come. So we will definitely do one interview separate.
Okay.
But it's itself, it's a long process.
It's a long project. Yeah.
So any other questions, please?
Just 5 more minutes.
It's a lot of things.
I think it's a combo of both.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
combo of both.
combination.
Yeah, honestly, it's very hard. I think after COVID, we saw like a surge of applicants applying to medical school. So then medical schools, they just didn't have enough seats to offer. You know, there's just so many more applicants, but everyone's good, but we can't accept everyone to
But
our
it's
school.
just like applying, like, bunch of people are A, okay, A plus, whatever, and then they have an MCAT score of whatever.
Yeah.
But what else did they do?
It's
Yeah.
also like
So you
some
have to look
schools
at
are,
the whole story like this.
yeah.
And some schools are looking for a
MCAT,
specific
your
thing.
GPA,
Mhm.
plus your extracurricular activities, your interview skills, your statements. I mean, these are separate things, you know. I mean, I'm aware of all these things. How do you write a good statement about
Mhm.
yourself? And how good are you in interviews as a personality? If your GPA is good, your MCAT, then you're just so boring a personality. They will not be.
So that's why you want to use your application.
And introverts can still. Yeah.
I think
You have to learn all these techniques.
Yeah.
There is also quite a good use of money or your application.
So that's why you want to use your application to show how you're unique. How are you different than all of these thousands of other people that are applying? And you want to show as many different versions of yourself, as many different sides of your personality, so that, you know, you stick out in the crowd.
I know one girl, I mean, had a great GPA, great MCAT score. She did not get into medical school.
Yeah.
She did not have any connection with her professors. But you need to go and talk to your professors. Don't be so shy, because if you're shy, they're not going to write you a good recommendation. So all these things, everything counts when you apply. Look at all these girls, they're very, very, speak so well, have a great personality, I mean, went to medical school. So you have to look at their personality, how they're going to go. So
I wouldn't say that. Don't be like.
Okay, I know you should, yeah.
You guys mentioned like having. To make it easier, like make it unique. If you guys can share like maybe like what you had as your theme or what you.
That's the whole question.
Yeah,
That's the question.
You have to think about yourself. What do you want to do? This is called rational thought or initiate. What do you say about that?
You know, something you can do.
Original thinking. Original thinking who have gone through this process.
I would love to talk to you.
And are willing to talk to the
One-on-one, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
The thing is, I can answer a little bit answer, and they are, you know, they have gone through the process, so they have given some very good advice on all. I would suggest your experience from that learning process is going to make you different from others.
Yes.
You might have done job in a blood bank. 10 other people might have done the blood bank, but your experience and your learning from that blood bank and your one of the situations that you may mention in your letter would, well, how did you learn, how it impacted you in your heart and soul? That is the different thing that is going to make it different from you and other 9 other people, or however you can say, so that your learning experience counts.
There's a WhatsApp.
Or future students.
Oh, yeah, we do have a.
Ongoing
Yes,
students and they can
absolutely.
interact with each other.
We have a AMWPA mentor, and you can have a WhatsApp group, you can give us your contact. Not for the parents. but for the students. Only for the
It's fine, yeah.
So any other question?
Well, you can also just come up to us. Yeah.
So I feel like for medical school applications, like if your ultimate goal is to go to medical school, the institution that you go to, as long as it's like a 4-year institution for your science courses, it doesn't really make a difference. You're going to find people from all over the place, from every university. The only time that the actual university, or in my opinion, what I feel like that the actual university counts is if you're not doing medical school. If you're doing something where prestige matters, like for example, law school, where you went to school to get into law, then it matters more. But for medical school, everyone's kind of on the same baseline, regardless of whatever institution that you attended.
There are some colleges that have that kind of environment, and they have groups that encourages them to talk notes, they have people who are mentoring them. Some other colleges don't care for that. It's my personal experience. You think it's a great school for having business and stuff, but if you're interested in a serious medical career, consider UTB. Even UD Austin is very good. See what percentage of students are going on to medical career. Look at that number. What percentage of your students apply for med school were accepted?
I feel like it's so much less about what school you go to and what you do at that school. Like some people thrive inside a big campus because they're able to just do things and they'll take advantage of the fact that it was a big campus, but some students just can't thrive that way. Like they want a smaller campus. Like personally, I knew that I would not have been able to thrive at a big school. I went to SMU for that reason because I wanted individualized attention. I wanted one-on-one. I wanted to know my professors. But some people are able to thrive, like mashallah, like Ridah was able to do it. You were able to do it like in some huge schools, you know, but everyone just has their own needs, you know? And so I feel like it's all about what you do at that school and not what school you went to. Because like this year, UTD had so many more people at Southwestern. SMU was only 3 of us, you know? And so it's like, it all just depends on literally what you do and how you personally think you will be able to thrive inside that. Yeah, so many, UT and UTD have the most people at our school.
When I went to your opening ceremony event.
Okay, thank you so very much for all of you coming here. And I thank you from the core of my heart, AMWPA leadership, that they have given us the opportunity to come here and spend their time on a weekend evening and, you know, with motivation, dedication to help the community. And now the younger generation, earlier it was just for physicians and physician assistants, but now it's for all the high school students and the college students as well. And I would like to also thank you, these beautiful ladies that have come here and dedicated their time to help the community. I would like to give them gift cards from IACC. Siddiqui. And Miss Shawana Shaikh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Miss Ridah Siddiqui. And Miss Sahar Elchehabi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
And you have been on your cap and I would like to.
My bun is too. I was. I know my bun is over. Open it on the back.
So pizza and donuts for you in the hallway. So please grab that pizza. So thank you for coming.
Did you make yours work? I just opened it.
12 graders, college student, medical students, we have a WhatsApp group and we can put you all in the WhatsApp. We have the mentoring program all the time, with healthcare all the time. You can, you know, get your experience and sharing doctors and all. Oh, yeah. No.
It'll be on YouTube, AMWPA.org.
You have a whole system on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, got it.
Oh, she got it?
Okay. Oh, oops.
Oh, I don't think Dr. Hannah was there.
Done. Okay, God was making, so maybe one.
Oh, man.
Hi, Ma. Thank you.
I need to go study. I have a final. Another one? Yeah. Yeah, what's up?
Thank you. Great job. You're doing very nice.